Greetings once and all. Greetings once again all to the Alaska Bigfoot Studies Paranormal Edition. So my apologies for not doing a full-blown Sasquatch video. Some of this is related though. I have to warn you, strap in. We're going for a ride today. We're talking about some way out there stuff, but I had to do it because I just saw, what is his channel's name? The Y-Files did a video just last week on the Dark Pyramid in Alaska. Fascinating subject. We talked about it in the Alaska Triangle. I really miss being on that show. Beans and I joke that we're going to get together one of these days when we get together with Rob, and we're just going to have a reunion for the Alaska Triangle. So uh, I believe they did away with the show just because there was the whole Discovery Plus absorbed the travel channel, and some shows just did not make it. But the whole idea behind a lot of the stuff the Alaska Triangle talked about, I thought was good. Of course, they were kind of cheesy and provocative at times, and I liked that. But some of the stuff and the questions they raised and the issues they focused on were really interesting. So I am going to delve into the Alaska Triangle, talk about how it's connected to some of these other things, and then show you where I believe the real Alaska Triangle within the triangle is. So we start off with this dark pyramid. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about that. Of course, I always suggest people check out Saucers of the North by Jessie Desmond. What I love about this is she starts off in the beginning, um, from the 1700s, the indigenous populations, oral traditions, and she goes all the way through until modern times, listing all of the identified reports, investigations, sightings. And then throughout there, she just intersperses actual facts from newspaper sources and the history of the United States and Alaska. And she doesn't tell you, oh, make this conclusion. She lets you draw your own conclusions, but you've got the spattering of sightings, and then she'll list, oh, and by the way, Alaska started, putting up these silos for ICBMs and nuclear warheads, and then this happened. But she doesn't say this is why, but it's really interesting how she puts all that information in chronological order. And the HAARP facility, we're going to talk about that. That's in here, and she does have several pages on the Dark Pyramid in Mount Hayes. Now, I have my own thoughts about where it's located. I think it's in that general direction. I don't think it's actually on Mount Hayes itself. So we start off, she talks about the Dark Pyramid. Well, she mentions the Dark Pyramid in page 61, and this is some of the stuff that the Y Files talked about. And Linda Moulton Howell is, I look up to her. She's a great investigator. I grew up listening to Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM, and that's what sparked a lot of this interest for me. So Linda Moulton Howell did several interviews with people who had knowledge of this dark pyramid. And I got to say, anytime I hear an intelligence officer was a whistleblower, that raises a red flag for me. And typically, I do not believe a lot of it, or I'll take it with a grain of salt, um, unless it's someone like Joe McGonigal, who I just today, for the third time, listened to his interview on Sean Ryan on the Stargate program. We'll talk about that in a minute, um, because there's that connection. But he's a stand-up guy, and I do believe him. But these other guys that are suddenly feeding us information on UFOs, and oh, guess what? They're from the intelligence section of the military. Guys, we're being fed exactly what they want us to know. If you look at the media, some of the big names out there, I do love that the Tic Tac footage was released. To me, that was huge. That was credible. But a lot of these stories and whistleblowers behind it, we're being fed exactly what they want us to be fed. There is the ongoing narrative that they're, trying to get us ready to at some point release the knowledge of, yes, UFOs are real. And we found down spacecraft. We reverse engineered this and release it to the public. That's why, when these movie directors did, you know, Encounters of the Fifth Kind or whatever that movie was, awesome movie. They're in on it. I don't think that's going to happen. If it's going to be the next generation that releases the information, because if they come out right now and say, yeah, there are UFOs, kept billions of dollars from the public and into these black projects, there's lots of people are going to hang. There's people that are still around that are going to be in big trouble because they lied to the US people about where this money was going into these black projects. Now, once all those people are out of the way, it will be safe to admit to the public. But right now, that's why people get disappeared, because there will be people who their whole careers and their life will be gone uh, because of the lies that have been going on. Now, do I believe the government within the government knows what's going on? Yes, but your typical even CIA guy or whatever, they don't know about any of this because it's hidden behind so many layers. But with the Alaska pyramid, it's very interesting. I do believe that the first interview that Linda did, or one of those with Muchler, um, something was going on. Somebody was tapping their phones and emails weren't going through. It's pretty interesting, but he was in intelligence, and some parts of his story don't line up where the dates were wrong. And nobody else came forward saying that, oh, yeah, I saw that, you know, piece on the evening news or the 11 o'clock news where they talked about the pyramid, and then they, Men in Black came and told us to take it away, and nobody, just he said that there was other guys as you. Nobody else came forward and say, yeah, that was on TV. I'd like to hear another report of that. But some of the other interviews she did were very interesting about people that were flown in, contractors. For me, that's more believable. I do believe there is a pyramid somewhere in the interior around that Mount Hayes area. And let's just throw up the footage of what I believe the triangle within the triangle is. So here's the footage I looked at. I've got Mount Hayes right there. You've got Fort Greely, where all the missile silos are for our aerial protection of this country and this state. That's public knowledge. Um, and then we have the HAARP facility. As you can see, they're all in that general area in the eastern interior of Alaska. I call this the triangle within the triangle. And I have a couple spots. There's a spot on top of a mountain that I think there might be a base. And there's also in this river, dried out river canyon, there could be some good places. But I don't believe that directly, I mean, it's possible, but directly, I think Mount Hayes is a bizarre area and we do have strange things happening there. But I don't believe that the base is right there with the pyramid. Now, the pyramid, um, I do believe that there's a pyramid, but it's, when people say this narrative that, oh, it's this power source, yes, it could be a power source. I do believe a lot of the pyramids, just like a lot of the ancient astronaut people community, believe that there was sort of this Tesla grid of power that the pyramids could channel, and it connected, the continents. I believe that happened, and we do have some really interesting evidence that they were using some of these, even the pyramid in Giza, as a power generator. Really fascinating. So I do believe something like that was going on. I do believe that there is a dark pyramid in Alaska, but I don't believe that the UFOs, UAPs are coming in and using it as this huge power generator. We've got evidence that they can generate themselves. They can generate power in geothermic areas. They're seen around volcanoes. They're seen drawing up water from the ocean, and they're seen in electrical storms. And I do believe something's up with Bob Lazar, but he has some points that he's made that just can't be denied. I think, of course, there's some contradictions, but his story is one of the stories that just fascinates me. And when he's talking about that element that they have perfect fusion. They're not needing to draw up power from this dark pyramid. They have these little generators producing fusion in the craft that'll last for generations. They're not going to show up to Mount Hayes and suck power out. They can get power lots of ways, but they don't even need to because they've got this perfect, unlimited almost power supply from this element in the chamber. So, but something is going on. I do believe that we have reverse engineering going on, especially because of Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. Um, I don't think it's a coincidence that he's no longer alive with us today because he was, early on whistleblower that talked about the crash retrieval and reverse engineering and where we get even the night vision goggles that I like to use. Those units were taken from the lenses of those little gray alien corpses that were, just like Bob Lazar said, they were like vessels, empty vessels that, intelligence would use. So I do believe that there is a base going on near Mount Hayes in the triangle within the triangle. But what I find very interesting is not only do we have these interviews that Linda Moulton Howe did with these whistleblowers and the stories from the contractors that got flown in there, but we have more than one remote viewer, and here's where it gets way out there. And I know Chuck from Alaska Ballistics is going to have a ball from this because he doesn't believe in Bigfoot. I think he believes in intelligent life in the universe, but he's a skeptic, and I appreciate that. That's what I like about Beans and Rob is they are very skeptical at times, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, this horrible Bigfoot video of somebody in a suit, that's not real." But like me, they do want to believe, and there is some evidence that is very interesting. Until that evidence is proved wrong, we're going to continue to search and go on these expeditions, which our first expedition is just a few weeks from now. So we're getting very excited for that, and we're going to the edge of civilization. We're not going to just be in some campground. We're not going to be in a campground. We're going to be boondocking in a hot spot of Sasquatch activity. But back to the Project Stargate. The name was changed several times, but it's amazing when the detractors try to make fun of this because Joe McGonigal is one of my heroes. Like I said, I just listened to his interview for the third time on Sean Ryan's podcast, but he had 15 different agencies, including the CIA, coming back to him over a decade because he was getting hits with his remote viewing. Now, remote viewing, for those of you that don't know, is the ability, and we have documented that intelligence agencies of this government started doing it in the 80s because other countries were doing it, maybe even the 70s. But what it is leaving consciousness, leaving the body, so to say, so you can not really view, but use your senses, psychic intuition, and gain information from somebody thousands of miles away, even across the world, across the universe, and sometimes. But, anyways, these guys were doing successful hits. They were finding missing people, they were finding spies. He found that Russian submarine that was secret for years and years, the biggest one ever made. He identified it and gave information about it just while he was in this chamber. So they have, just like on Stranger Things, they have these chambers that you get in, sensory deprivation of a kind, um, and a system that helps them do this. And so he successfully remote viewing and finding targets and being successful with it. Uh, and this has been proven. I mean, you can look at the documents. It's proven that it existed. and the detractors, a congressman can't be caught next to a psychic. So of course it was really easy for them to have a study done and say, okay, this is crap. But um, you can't deny that it was going on, for over a decade, and you know, 13 out of the 15 agencies were coming back because they were getting positive results and they wanted more intelligence, and so they came back over and over. And so we've got documented history of this remote viewing working. Now, I really resonate with this because at the same time, in the 80s, when I was graduating from high school, me and my buddy in this gifted program or whatever, we were doing these psychic tests where we were getting positive results, and exactly what Joe McGonigal was doing by identifying objects that were written down in an envelope and drawing pictures describing them. And I had some positive hits that, I mean, there was no way I could have known that, would have been one in a million, one in 500,000, unless I was cheating, which I wasn't, but I was identifying objects using this intuition. And then a few years later, when I went on to commercial fishing, and you could say, oh, Chuke, you were, sleep deprived, because yes, it was true. I was up for 23 hours, just about 24 hours on a tender vessel in the Gulf of Alaska. And, you're sorting fish. The other boats come in and they're dumping fish. I'm sorting coho, sockeye, down these different slides. And when it's hot and the runs are hot, you don't sleep. You get screamed at if you want to take a break. You just sit there, and for 18 hours, you're working. So I stayed up about 23 hours. No drugs, because that's not allowed on a fishing boat. Very strict about that. And when I went to sleep in my bunk, I had this feeling that my soul consciousness was being ripped sideways from my body. And as it was happening, I was screaming, I'm leaving. And anyways, my soul was ripped. And you could say, oh, yeah, that's, it's documented scientifically in medical documents that you hallucinate, you're sleep deprived. And that is true, but this was the most intense experience I've ever had. Before this, I did, like I say, have practicing these psychic target hits. And on top of that, I was also practicing lucid dreaming, which is one step away from remote viewing, because in lucid dreaming, you're completely conscious in your dream. You know what's going on. And the project I would do is I would make myself fly. So I believe I was remote viewing because I was flying, above my house in my small town in the air, completely aware of everything. Lucid dreaming. You can look up, you can practice it if you're intentional. Before you go to sleep, there's some steps you can take. I think that's the first step to remote viewing. But in this case, I hadn't slept. I was on a fishing boat. Uh, my consciousness was ripped sideways from my body. And then I emerged in this pool of water, and there was a like beautiful naked goddess, standing halfway in the water. Her torso was out of the water with these glowing blue eyes. There's all these multicolored glowing orbs around her, and I just sat there for about 10 seconds, um, completely terrified. I couldn't take my eyes off her, and there was just this sense of power. And then you can, the female essence of the ocean. I was literally out in the middle of the ocean doing this. Um, it was one of the most intense experiences of my life. I then felt myself sucked back into my body, and then I just passed out from exhaustion. But when I woke up, I was just freaking out. I was just um, it was no doubt a seminal moment in my life where I believed I did do some kind of remote viewing. And just like Joe McGonigal said, instead of going over to Russia or something, I was in another dimension or experiencing another form of existence. But, anyways, I know that's way out there. Let's get back to the pyramid. So, we have these guys working for the CIA in a compound in sensory deprivation. They're looking for spies up in the north, Russia, submarines, and they're scanning, and they come across this huge power source, so it just draws them in. And so their consciousness is viewing this dark pyramid in Mount Hayes. That's where they identified it. And there were this dark pyramid with machines hooked up to it, huge pyramid, bigger than the Pyramid of Giza, in an underground cave inside this chamber in a mountain. There are laboratories there with hallways. There's the classic, just like on Stranger Things, little bunker, doorway, elevator shaft on the top of this glacial mountain area that you take the elevator way down to get to the chambers with the laboratories in. And then you've got alien entities working alongside the humans, craft, that kind of thing. So not only did Joe McGonigal, and he didn't really want to go to detail, not only was he tired at the end of a 2 hour interview, um, he admitted that for some of these things, he doesn't remember a lot of the details. But I think it's a national security thing too. He's not going to go into great detail about that. But he had a positive contact remote viewing, and then one or two other guys. There's Harvey Trent, some of the other big names, some of them we don't even know about that might still be working. Uh, they had a positive viewing of the Dark Pyramid. Now, to me, because I believe in the Monroe Institute remote viewing and Joe McGonigal, I take that as a little bit higher uh, of evidence versus Linda Moulton Howell's interviews. But I do think her interviews are help. You've got all these sources coming to the same thing with the Dark Pyramid within Alaska, and all kinds of strange things happen in Alaska. We'd talk for hours about that. But here's what I think is going on. So you've got the Dark Pyramid. I don't think it's much about the Dark Pyramid. I do believe it exists there, but that's a weird sound. I believe that there is a base with motherships in the interior of Alaska. Now, before I think lately the Nimitz and the Tic Tacs, that's the number one sighting confirmed on FLIR. Government saying, yes, we saw these craft going from 80,000 feet down to just above the water, even being able to enter the water in a couple seconds, doing maneuvers that we can't. People are trying to say they're drones. They can't be drones because drones don't have the power source to stay in the upper atmosphere for days and days and then shoot down like that. We don't have the energy or technology for that. Now, could it be a black project? Some of this could be, but I do believe it is alien technology, absolutely. So when it comes to motherships, before the Tic Tacs, like I was saying, we have the Japan Airlines incident, I believe 1993. And that's why I love Jessie Desmond's book, because she's got it all right here. So it was Japan Airlines, I believe the flight 1628. So this a was not a passenger, it was a cargo plane. Japanese pilot. This was actually in 1986. So she's got it all listed here. It made the papers. What is significant about this sighting is this Japanese pilot saw this mothership, just like a lot of the other classic stories I'm going to talk about, size of one or two aircraft carriers, just toying with him, just circling the plane. But what's interesting is we got an eyewitness from a Japanese pilot. Now, pilots in general in 1986 in America would not come forward with a story like this. Everybody makes fun of you, it affects your career, but Japan, it's way worse. So he came forward, we got this eyewitness, but what else do we have? We have other airplanes seeing it, the bright lights. We have multiple radar hits identifying the exact point he's looking at. Yeah, we've got a bogey coming in. He tried to circle and get away with it, get away from them. It followed him. Then he just got scared and they told him just stay on course. It eventually went away. But we had military radar tracking it and saying, yeah, we're seeing it. We had the main ground radar uh, of the airport, international airport in Anchorage, saying, yeah, we're seeing this. We had the planes radar, we had other planes radar. So we got multiple, technology hits on this thing, different kinds of radar saying, yeah, this is a physical object. It's huge. And, it's coming close to the airplane. And then you've got this pilot And the co-pilot just like, what the hell? And their faces were all sunburned because it came right up to them, looked like this giant glowing tortoise. There were smaller UFOs going into them. I think Alaska's a hot spot for these motherships. And not only do we have bases in the ocean because they've been seen going in the ocean and out, we know that all over the world, but in the interior of Alaska, especially, we're getting reports of these motherships. Now, I have talked to a former infantryman who was on these. We have a lot of helicopter crews, and they pretty much can go anywhere in Alaska because they refuel. Not these Blackhawks have like a big fuel tank, but then they're going along and they get refueled several times. They could just go forever. So you've got this guy telling me that he was on a crew out in the interior. So the interior, roughly Fairbanks, that middle part of Alaska, you're not by the coast. He saw this massive bright light, and they weren't near anything. They knew where all the other, units were and flights were. There was nothing reported. He saw this huge, blinding bright light out in the distance of a very large vessel out in the middle of nowhere where nothing should have been. Another report, a psychiatric nurse that has worked in Alaska for almost 30 years in kind of this time period, the 90s, outside of Fairbanks, so the same area. Fort Greely is not too far from Fairbanks. When you get there an hour and a half. She saw a mothership the size of several aircraft carriers, all lit up, no conventional propulsion, silently moving very close to her and just massive. So we've got all these sightings of motherships. And when I speak of a mothership, it's like a very giant ship that other ships go into. So these are ships capable of interstellar travel. It's command center, and they're coming out of these bases. That's what I think is in this triangle within the triangle near Mount Hayes, but it's in between Fort Greely, where our ballistic missiles are that are protecting us from any threat from North Korea, especially Mount Hayes, and then we got HAARP. Now, what's the deal with HAARP? What's interesting is Nick Begich Jr., who has written some wonderful books on this. I used to hang out with that guy in the 90s at coffee shops, and that was when they were just starting to get going. They didn't do the HAARP facility till about 93, but around that time, we would have these just insane conversations about it. Now, what's interesting about HAARP, it's this huge array, and Jesse Desmond talks about it here. These crazy looking antennas. All throughout this video, I'm going to have my artwork here. But this journal I've done is a treasure trove of paranormal and Bigfoot stuff. All my notes and pictures go into that. But it's these array of these microwave antennas. They can also do these high frequency radio bursts. But it's this massive array, the only one like it in the country. Russia, we have heard, has something similar. So this came right after the Cold War. During the 80s, kind of ended the Cold War, the government literally admitted, yes, we are working on weather manipulation. Then a couple of years later, almost at that exact same time, they go, oh, we've got this HAARP facility, all these weird, wacky looking antennas that we're aiming at the upper ionosphere to study the aurora. But we're not doing, because everybody immediately asks, oh, are you doing weather manipulation as a weapon? Oh, no, we're not doing that. Yet you just admitted that you were working on programs to weaponize weather manipulation. The government actually said that they were working on that. But then they come out with this thing because they had to, because everybody would have seen satellite pictures. It's over there by Toke or Gukana or whatever. I am planning on doing some more investigations on this subject, but fascinating. I mean, it's the giant array that can really put out some powerful bursts into the upper atmosphere. And there's a lot of theories that it's creating earthquakes and tornadoes and stuff like that. And I can't say, of course, whether they've done that, but I do believe it is more than studying. I mean, the space station can study the aurora borealis better than HAARP can. HAARP is actually, it's not receiving, it's transmitting these waves directed, very directed. That's what's crazy about it, because you've got all these arrays. You are able to get very directed pinpoint beams, very powerful beams. Oh man, there's a moose right there. They could be taking out satellites. They could be doing all kinds of things. He's just slowly walking. I'll keep talking and won't get up. He's about 40 yards away from me, just going through the clearing. But yeah, so in between HAARP, the Fort Greely, and we know that wherever there's nuclear reactors, especially nuclear warheads, that has brought UFOs to study it, sometimes shut them down, shooting beams into it. That's been documented. We've got reports of that happening. So Fort Greely, HAARP, and Mount Hayes. Somewhere in there is a base with a mothership and the Dark Pyramid. But I think the base with the mothership and experiments going on is bigger than the Dark Pyramid. But, anyways, I'm going to leave with that. I've rambled enough. I will be talking about this more. Sorry for the Bigfoot enthusiasts. We will get back to Bigfoot next week, and we're going to have some expeditions really soon. But get a load of this moose. He was really close earlier. Where's our little friend? There we go. Anyways, really cool. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.